Todd Barclay.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Whether or not the by-election in Northland's a referendum on the government's performance, it certainly won't be an endorsement of Labor's, because they can't even support their own candidate, let alone ask the people of Northland to support their candidate. I want to talk about how this government is supporting families, Mr Speaker, and how we're doing it through an integrated, client-focused investment approach with regard to families and vulnerable New Zealanders. This is a way of thinking that's been led by this government and it's been implemented over the last 6 years, and there's a lot more work to do. Something that the former Labor government had nothing to say about. When we came in, we set new targets, we're working towards those targets, and we're seeing results, Mr Speaker. Mr Speaker, the net present value or cost of the total benefit population in this country is $76 billion, and there are two key groups I want to focus on today. The first are teen sole parents. We know that there are 2,600 teen sole parents, and as Minister Tolley outlined today, that's dropped by 50% since 2009 under this government. We know that there will be a 20-year average that those people will spend on a benefit at a cost of $250,000 each if they don't have a qualification. There are a number of steps that are being taken by this government to address that, Mr Speaker. One, we're putting a responsible adult with each and every one of these people to provide them with budgetary support, to get them back into education, to get them a qualification which will enable them to get back into the workforce. We know that if a teen solo parent who is under the age of 20 with no qualification will spend an average of 20 years on a benefit. If they don't have a qualification, if they can get a post-school qualification, that average reduces from 20 years on a benefit down to 7 years. That's a considerable contribution towards these people's lives and to the taxpayer, Mr Speaker. There are another group of children I want to talk about, and these are children in care. These are hugely disproportionate cost drivers for the government. We know that there are 2,000 males currently in care and based on 30 years worth of records through Treasury, Education, MSD, Justice and Corrections all working together. We know that these kids are destined for a life of involvement in the justice sector and correctional facilities if they don't get back on track. These are kids that are currently misbehaving in school and that are going through foster home after foster home. There is one 10-year-old foster kid in my electorate, Mr Speaker, that's been through 93 foster homes. And that's just unacceptable. I couldn't imagine putting myself in the position of that kid mentally when he is getting chucked from family to family, day on day, week on week, and then having to go to school and trying to get a qualification. This government's taken considerable steps to try and get these kids back on track so that they can have the life that they deserve and that the life that their families and coming families will deserve, Mr Speaker. And what are we doing about that? We're implementing an individualised policy approach led by Minister Tolley, formerly Minister Bennett and Minister English, Mr Speaker. Just going back to these 2,000 kids, we know that during the lifetime, if they don't get back on track now, combined they'll have a collective cost to the taxpayer of $750 million in corrections costs alone. So, Mr Speaker, what do we do about that to try and get them back on track, to try and improve their life chances? We are individualising the policy around them, getting government departments to think of them as individuals and as people instead of thinking about how departments best operate and work. So that is what we're doing, Mr Speaker. Unlike Labor, our government cares about the individuals and we care about families. And I can tell you how many young people receive sole parent benefits in my electorate. In Gore there are 185, in Clutha District there are 168, and in Queenstown there are 98. In Awaka, of the 228 people, 9 of them are unemployed, 3 of them are on a sickness benefit, 6 are on the domestic purposes benefit, and 9 are on the invalid's benefit. We know individual people, where they are, we know their names, and government departments are now working with them to get them back into a better position. Mr Speaker, talking about Northland, we know who our candidate is and we fully get behind him and back him. Mark Osborne, Mr Speaker. Getting back though, the most compelling statistic that I found, Mr Speaker, was regarding the number of people that are currently in correctional facilities, Mr Speaker. We have reduced youth crime and we've reduced recidivism under this government and under the integrated approach that we're taking. Mr Speaker, in conclusion, I want to fully support the steps that this government is taking under the leadership of some very strong ministers to put families first, to put individuals at the centre. We're improving public services, we're raising achievement standards, we're reducing crime and recidivism, and we're improving the lives of families and individual New Zealanders. Thank you, Mr Speaker.